the sound of cutlery clinking against plates, the murmur of voices blending with occasional laughter. Everything felt perfectly normal that night. A night that should have just been another dinner among friends. But something in the air was different. Heavier, almost electric. I sat next to Evan, my boyfriend, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence as he engaged in a lively conversation with Jake, the host of the evening. I should have been paying attention, smiling at the right moments, but my gaze was drawn, against my will, to the other end of the table. To him, Nathan, Evan's best friend. The man with the intense gaze, reserved personality, and a teasing manner that always made me feel uncomfortable. He always seemed to know exactly what to say to unsettle me, as if he were playing a secret game that only the two of us were part of. And there he was, casually leaning back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine between his fingers, looking at me. It wasn't a long stare, it wasn't blatant, but it was direct enough for my body to react before my mind even processed it. A warm wave rose up my neck, and I held my breath, immediately looking away. Not this again. From the moment we met, there had been something about Nathan that made me restless. It wasn't just the fact that he was absurdly handsome with his striking features and eyes that always seemed to analyze everything around him. It was the way he spoke, as if there were always a hidden second layer in his words. As if he were testing my limits without ever needing to be obvious. "You're quiet," Evan commented beside me, casually resting his hand on my thigh. I blinked a few times, forcing myself to return to the present. "I'm just enjoying dinner," I lied, smiling faintly. Evan accepted my answer without question, turning his attention back to the friends. Nathan didn't. He was still looking. But this time, there was something different in his expression. Something that made me want to get up and leave. Or maybe stay and see how far this could go. Conversations intertwined around the table, accompanied by the muffled sound of background music. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, but none of it seemed to have real weight for me. I felt my own presence there as something out of place, as if I were watching the scene from the outside without really being part of it. And I knew exactly why. Nathan. His gaze wasn't insistent, nor obvious, but it was constant. I could feel it. Even when he wasn't looking directly at me, there was something in his posture that told me he was paying attention. Too much attention. I picked up my wine glass and brought it to my lips, trying to disguise the strange knot forming in my stomach. That's when I heard his voice, low, almost lazy, but laden with that damn veiled intention. "You seem uncomfortable." I swallowed the wine abruptly, nearly choking. I turned to him, finding those eyes filled with something I couldn't name. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He tilted his head slightly, as if assessing my reaction before responding. "Nothing, just an observation." A spark of irritation mixed with something else, something I didn't want to acknowledge, traveled down my spine. He was doing this on purpose, testing me, but he wouldn't get the satisfaction of a response. Looking away, I pretended to pay attention to Evan, who was now animatedly talking about a project at work. I wanted to lose myself in that moment, in the normalcy of being next to my boyfriend. But then, as if he knew exactly what was happening in my mind, Nathan spoke again. "Jake, where do you keep the special wines?" Jake, distracted, nodded toward the side door. "In the basement. Grab a good one for us." Nathan stood up, casually adjusting the sleeve of his shirt before looking at me. "Want to help me choose one?" My breath caught for a second. He wasn't using a challenging tone, nor even one of suggestion. But there was a subtext there. Something silent and loaded that only the two of us seemed to notice. My first instinct was to refuse. But when I looked at Evan, I saw he was completely immersed in conversation, giving no attention to the invitation, not even noticing. "Sure," I replied before I could change my mind. When I stood up, I felt Nathan beside me, too close. The mere thought of going down the stairs next to him made my heart race. And I knew, in that moment, that nothing that night would be as simple as it seemed. The air in the basement was colder than I expected, and the smell of aged wood mixed with the subtle aroma of old wine created a strange atmosphere. I wrapped my arms around myself, watching Nathan as he walked between the shelves of bottles, his fingers sliding idly over the labels. Any preferences? He asked without looking at me, his voice low, echoing in the tight space. I'm no expert. I'm just here because you asked, I replied, keeping my distance. Nathan let out a small laugh, that half sigh filled with irony that always kept me on edge. All right, how about a Cabernet? Classic, balanced, hard to go wrong. Before I could respond, a loud bang echoed through the basement. The door had slammed shut behind me, and when I turned to open it, I felt panic rise in my throat. The doorknob turned but wouldn't budge. I tried again. Nothing. It's locked. My voice came out louder than I intended. Nathan, on the other hand, didn't seem surprised. He simply observed the situation with an unsettling calm, as if he were analyzing a problem without any hurry to solve it. Looks like we're trapped, he stated, leaning against the nearest shelf. My heart raced, my fingers gripping uselessly at the cold doorknob. We need to get out of here. Someone is going to notice that we disappeared. Nathan raised an eyebrow, one corner of his mouth curling up. With that loud music? I doubt it. The truth in those words hit me. The party continued upstairs, voices and music muffled by the concrete around us. I swallowed hard. The space felt smaller now. Each of my breaths echoed in the silence between us. Nathan crossed his arms, his gaze assessing every detail of my reaction. You're nervous. Because we're trapped, Nathan, I shot back, frustrated. But it wasn't just that, and I knew it. He knew it too. That silent tension that always hung between us was now locked in there with me. No distractions, no way to ignore it. And worse than everything, Nathan didn't seem bothered by it at all. The silence began to weigh heavily. I crossed my arms, trying to ignore how the cold of the basement seemed to seep into my skin. Every second in there felt like it was dragging on, making the atmosphere suffocating. Nathan moved slowly, unhurried, grabbing one of the bottles from the shelf. He studied the label as if nothing was wrong, as if we weren't locked together in a space small enough for me to feel the subtle warmth of his presence. You seem uncomfortable, he commented, not taking his eyes off the wine. My body tensed. Because I am. He finally lifted his gaze, and the intensity in it made my breath falter for a moment. Because of the door, or because of me? My stomach twisted. Don't be ridiculous. Nathan smirked, that kind of smile that revealed nothing yet said everything. It was just a question. I turned my back to him, closing my eyes for a moment and taking a deep breath. I needed to calm down. There was no reason for this suffocating feeling in my chest, for the strange heat rising up my neck. But then, I heard him step closer. His steps were slow, and I could feel each one. The electricity in the air heightened with every inch he closed between us. You can relax, you know, he said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. I turned around quickly, feeling my irritation grow alongside something else I didn't want to name. I am relaxed. Nathan tilted his head slightly, as if studying me. Sure you are. I wanted to hate the way he looked at me, as if he could see something I couldn't even see myself. But worst of all, he was right. The tension between us wasn't new. It had always been there. The difference was that now, there were no more distractions to pretend we didn't feel it. The tension hung in the air like a thread about to snap. I instinctively backed away, putting space between us, but Nathan stayed where he was, watching me with that irritating calm, as if he knew exactly what was going on inside me. Do you always run away like this? He asked, casually leaning against the shelf behind him. I crossed my arms, trying to regain some composure. What are you talking about? He spun the wine bottle between his fingers as if the situation wasn't worthy of his full attention. Everything. What's right in front of you, what you pretend not to see. I swallowed hard, forcing a humorless laugh. You love playing the enigmatic one, don't you? This time he smiled for real. It wasn't a teasing smile, but something more subtle, almost melancholic. Only when the truth is too obvious to be stated. There was something in his tone that bothered me. A weight. A certainty. And then he said, Evan doesn't deserve you. The impact of those words hit me hard. What? You heard me. My heartbeat quickened and a knot formed in my stomach. That's ridiculous. You don't have the right to say something like that. Nathan sighed, shaking his head slightly, as if he had already expected my reaction. I know you need to believe you're with the right person, that you made the right choice. But tell me something. He tilted his head to the side, his eyes locked on mine. Are you happy? Really? My throat dried up. Of course I am. He raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Anger surged through my chest, but it wasn't directed at him. It was against myself, against the hesitation that took me for a second. Because for a moment, I wasn't sure. Nathan noticed. He always notices. The cold of the basement began to seep into my skin, becoming impossible to ignore. I crossed my arms, rubbing my hands on my shoulders, trying to push away the icy sensation running down my spine. But it wasn't just the cold. It was Nathan. He was still there, watching me, his expression unreadable. I wanted to look away, wanted to find anything to distract me. The shelves full of bottles, the broken doorknob, anything but him. But my body seemed too in tune with his presence. Then, without warning, he moved. Unhurried, without hesitation. He simply took off the jacket he was wearing and held it out to me. Here. I froze for a second. It was a simple, common gesture, but something in the way he did it. In the way his eyes watched me while I held it. I don't need it, I murmured, even knowing it was a lie. You're shaking, he countered, his voice low, assured. I swallowed hard. My pride told me to refuse, but my body surrendered before I could fight it. I took the jacket from his hands, and in that small movement, my fingers brushed against his. It was quick, accidental, but the effect was immediate. An electric current coursed through my skin, warm and intense, making my breath falter for a moment. Nathan didn't pull away immediately. For a second longer than necessary, his fingers lingered there, lightly brushing against mine. When he finally withdrew, a subtle smile appeared on his lips, as if he had noticed everything, as if he knew I felt it too. I quickly turned my back, pulling the coat around my body, trying to hide the avalanche of feelings that were swirling inside me. But it was no use. Because now, the cold was no longer the problem. Time seemed to stretch in that basement. Each second dragged on slowly, heavy as lead. I drummed my fingers against the bottle of wine Nathan had chosen, trying to ignore his presence so close. Trying to ignore his coat around my shoulders, too warm against my cold skin. Anxiety began to take over. It's been too long, I murmured, suddenly standing up. They're going to notice we're gone. I walked to the door and knocked hard. Hey, is anyone there? Nothing. The music upstairs drowned out any attempt I made to get attention. I knocked again, this time harder. Great, Nathan huffed, leaning against the shelf with an amused look. You're going to bring the whole house down like that. I turned to face him, irritated by his casual tone. Do you think this is funny? He shrugged. I don't think freaking out is going to help much. I closed my eyes for a second, taking a deep breath, trying to contain my frustration. But patience was running thin. Aren't you even a little worried about this? I asked, crossing my arms. Nathan looked at me for a long moment before answering, his voice low, laden with something I couldn't quite define. Maybe I just think that since we're here, we should take the opportunity. My eyes narrowed. Opportunity? He tilted his head, analyzing me. To have an honest conversation. My stomach twisted. There was something in the way he said that, in the way his gaze seemed to pin me in place. I don't know what you're talking about, I murmured, looking away. Don't know? Nathan stepped forward. Not enough to break the distance between us, but enough to make me feel his presence more intensely. Because I think you do. And in that moment, I knew that running away was no longer an option. The silence between us was almost palpable, dense as the air in that cramped basement. Nathan didn't back down. He didn't look away. He just waited. And I hated that, because it meant he knew. Knew that something was different, that I was different. That no matter how much I tried to cling to the idea that nothing had changed between us, the truth was different. I don't know why you insist on this. My voice came out lower than I intended. Nathan let out a humorless laugh, running his hand through his hair before looking at me again. Because I'm tired of pretending. My breath hitched. He stepped forward. I've always felt something for you. Always. My heart raced, and for a second I was sure he could hear it. I shook my head, stepping back. Stop. Why? Because you don't want to hear it? His voice was calm, but there was something there. A contained frustration. Because it doesn't make sense, I shot back, my mind spinning. You never said anything, never gave any hint. Nathan laughed, but there was no amusement in his eyes. Or maybe you never wanted to see it. My chest was rising and falling too fast. My thoughts were a whirlwind, a dangerous mix of denial and something I didn't want to acknowledge. He continued, I never said anything because I couldn't, because you were with him, because you seemed happy. I swallowed hard. And now, what's changed? Nathan looked at me for a moment that lingered too long. You. My pulse faltered. You don't seem happy anymore. I wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was wrong, but the words didn't come, and by Nathan's look, he already knew the answer. My heart was still pounding in my chest, out of sync. What Nathan had just said echoed in my mind, messing everything up. You don't seem happy anymore, I should have retorted. Should have said he was wrong. But I couldn't. And Nathan knew that. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He just closed the distance between us, slowly. No rush. Didn't touch me. Didn't need to. The simple fact that he was so close, looking at me that way, intense, challenging, waiting for my reaction, made my breath falter. I could feel the heat of his body, even without any contact. The space between us was small, but charged with something dangerous, something I should want to avoid. But I didn't move. I should have. Should have taken a step back, crossed my arms, turned my face. Anything to make it clear that none of this made sense. But I did nothing. I stayed there, feeling. Nathan lowered his face a bit, his eyes fixed on mine, as if he was waiting for me to push him away, as if he was testing how far I would let him go. My body was still, but inside it was chaos. My brain was screaming, telling me to stop this before it was too late. But my heart was beating as if it already knew that deep down, maybe it was already too late. The air between us was charged, dense. Each beat of my heart felt like a warning, an alarm I was ignoring. Nathan didn't move. I didn't either. He stayed there, close enough for me to feel his breath. His eyes never left mine, and the way he looked at me, I knew what was coming next. My chest was rising and falling too fast. My body was tense, every cell in me too aware of the moment. Of his presence. Nathan slowly raised one hand hesitantly, as if giving me the chance to stop him, as if he was waiting for me to say no. But I didn't. He didn't even touch me, but almost. The heat of his fingers brushed against my skin, a tiny space between us, enough to ignite every nerve in my body. And then, as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over me, I recoiled, fast, as if waking from a trance. The shock in Nathan's gaze was subtle, but it was there. He blinked once as if processing my reaction, and then pulled his hand back. I took a step back, and then another. My heart was out of control. My chest was heaving. I can't. My voice came out weak but firm. Nathan remained still, studying me, his jaw tense. But you want to. My stomach churned. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say he was wrong. But the truth was there, between us. And he knew it. Silence fell between us like an invisible wall. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to catch my breath, trying to sort out the chaos inside me. Nathan continued to stand, motionless. His expression was serious, but his eyes said more than he let on. He didn't try to speak. He didn't try to convince me of anything. And that somehow made everything even harder. My chest was still rising and falling too quickly, as if my body refused to return to normal. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to push away the memory of what almost happened, because if I admitted to myself what I was feeling, it would be real. And I couldn't let it be. Nathan let out a low sigh, but he didn't move. I felt him there, standing, watching me, waiting. But he didn't ask anything. He didn't insist. He just let me deal with that whirlwind in my own way. And somehow, that silence said everything. The silence still weighed in the air, but inside me, it was chaos. I needed to think. I needed to sort out the jumbled feelings inside my chest. My relationship with Evan had always been predictable, safe. There had never been doubts. There had never been this feeling of being on the edge of something dangerous. But with Nathan, it was a whirlwind, an abyss about to swallow me whole. The worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to run away or dive in head first. I took a deep breath, clutching his jacket around my body, as if that could bring me clarity. Nathan was still there, leaning against the shelf, watching me without a rush. "You're overthinking," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "And you don't think enough." He smiled slightly, as if he recognized the truth in my answer. "Maybe." I fell silent for a moment, feeling the weight of that gaze on me. "This," I murmured, unable to look him in the eye. "This should never have happened." But it did. I closed my eyes, exhausted. And now? Nathan didn't respond immediately. When he spoke, it was in such a low tone that it almost got lost in the air between us. "Now, the choice is yours." My chest tightened, because deep down, I knew he was right. And that no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I had already made my choice. Time seemed to have dissolved in that basement. I didn't know if minutes or hours had passed since the door had closed, locking us inside. But then, a noise from outside. Voices, footsteps, my body tensed. Nathan and I exchanged a quick glance, and in an instant, the tension that had seemed unbearable dissipated in the air. The doorknob turned. The door opened. Jake appeared at the top of the stairs, frowning when he saw us there. "What the hell are you doing down here?" My mouth went dry. My heart was pounding. I jumped forward, running my hands over my face as if trying to erase everything that had happened, or almost happened. The door. It locked by itself. My voice came out too quickly, as if I were in a hurry to justify. Jake laughed, shaking his head. "I told you this thing needed fixing. You guys should have yelled." Nathan said nothing. He just picked up the bottle of wine and walked up the stairs leisurely. I followed him. When we returned to the living room, reality settled in like a cold shock. The music was still playing. Laughter filled the air. Everything was exactly as it had been before. Except me. Except him. And when Evan came over to plant a distracted kiss on my forehead, everything inside me screamed. Because I no longer felt anything. Across the room, Nathan was watching me. His gaze met mine for a moment. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The party continued, but for me, everything seemed out of focus. The voices, the laughter, the music, everything felt distant, like irrelevant background noise. I should have been there, present. But my mind was trapped in that basement. Trapped in him. Evan put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close while he continued talking to friends. It was an automatic, familiar gesture. A gesture that, a few hours ago, I would have accepted without thinking. But now, it just felt wrong. I couldn't ignore the lack of reaction inside me. That was when I felt the gaze. I looked up, and across the room, Nathan was there. Leaning against the wall, a glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes fixed on me. Time stopped. There was nothing else between us. No door, no distance that could serve as an excuse. Just that look. And then, for the first time, I saw. I saw what had always been there, but I had never had the courage to acknowledge. It was intense, charged. It was a shared secret that no one but us two knew. A dilemma that only I could resolve. 3 days. 3 days since dinner. Since the basement. Since everything changed. I tried to go on normally. I tried to ignore the confusion inside me, the way my thoughts always circled back to him. To us. But avoiding Nathan wasn't as easy as avoiding a thought. Because deep down, part of me wanted to see him again. And then, as if fate had decided for me, it happened. I was leaving a cafe when I saw him. Nathan was leaning against the side of the car, arms crossed, as if he knew exactly I would show up there. My heart raced. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, unsure whether to turn back or keep going, but he didn't give me that option. Slowly, he walked up to me. 3 days, he said, as if he knew I had been counting them. I swallowed hard. What are you doing here? Nathan didn't answer immediately. His eyes analyzed every detail of my face as if trying to find answers I wasn't ready to give. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. Say it was a mistake. My breath faltered. What? He tilted his head, his expression serious but calm. Say that everything that happened was a mistake, that none of it meant anything to you. My stomach turned. I wanted to speak. I wanted to give the right answer. But the words wouldn't come out. Because it wasn't a mistake. Nathan realized. His eyes darkened as if my hesitation was all he needed to hear. And then he stepped forward. I knew. My chest tightened. Because in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. My world was divided in two. On one side, the safe path, the predictable. The life I knew, the one I had chosen. On the other, the unknown, the whirlwind, the feeling I could no longer deny. Nathan. He was there, standing in front of me, waiting. His gaze wasn't a plea. It wasn't a request. It was a challenge. He knew I already had my answer. He just wanted me to have the courage to say it out loud. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. This is wrong, I murmured, not very convincingly. Nathan smiled slightly. Wrong would be lying to yourself. My breath faltered. Because he was right. Because I could no longer pretend. Because what happened in the basement couldn't be undone. And I needed to decide. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I held the strap of my bag. It was now. I looked at him one last time, and I chose. Now I want to know, what would you do in the protagonist's place? Would you choose the safe or the inevitable? Comment here, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.